Let me explain what I mean. You were born, but that does not mean you have become yourself. Most people spend their lives running from this truth that their identity is not fixed, but something they must create, shape, and bring into existence through conscious effort. You are not just flesh and bone. You are potential, but potential is nothing without choice, without struggle, without pain. You were handed a name, a religion, a nationality, and you were told, this is who you are, and most people, they accept it. They wear their borrowed identity like a uniform and never question who is really behind the mask. But I am telling you, that is not life. That is survival. To give birth to yourself is to break free from the illusions others placed upon you. It is to peel away the layers of fear, conformity, and comfort until you reach what is real, until you no longer ask, who should I be? But instead, who am I without the noise? It is not a comfortable process. It is a rebirth, and all birth is bloody, painful, and terrifying. But if you do not undergo this transformation, then you will die having never lived your own life. That, to me, is the greatest tragedy. Before we begin, let me speak to you not as a philosopher, but as someone who has watched human beings slowly forget what it means to be alive. You scroll, you hustle, you chase applause, but inside you feel disconnected. You wonder why, despite all your effort, you still feel incomplete. That is not your failure. It is the failure of a world that taught you to build a life outside yourself, while your inner self withers in silence. The truth is, modern life does not want you to improve. It wants you to obey, to stay busy, to become useful, not powerful. But I did not write for the obedient, I wrote for the awakened, for the few who still dare to become fully human in a world that rewards the mechanical. And if you are listening now, then perhaps you are one of them. In today's message, I will share with you 5 brutal truths you must face not to become more successful, but to become more yourself. These are not tips. They are awakenings, because self-improvement in its highest form is not about fixing who you are. It is about giving birth to the person you were always meant to become. Number 1. Trapped by comfort. Why most people never grow. Let me tell you the most dangerous prison of all. It is not built with bricks or barbed wire. It does not need guards or chains. It is built with comfort, and its walls are invisible. In modern society, people are not enslaved by tyrants. They are enslaved by their own desire to feel safe, to feel numb, to feel nothing at all. They no longer seek growth. They seek sedation. They confuse comfort with happiness. They confuse ease with freedom. And in doing so, they kill the part of themselves that longs to become something more. You wake up each day not because you're alive, but because the alarm tells you to. You go to work, not because it brings you meaning, but because you're afraid of what would happen if you stopped. You scroll, you binge, you consume, and you tell yourself this is living. But you are only surviving. Comfort has become your God, and you worship it daily. You avoid pain, you avoid failure, you avoid truth. And that is why you avoid growth, because growth demands suffering. It demands the death of the old self. It demands you leave the warm bed of routine and walk barefoot into the cold wilderness of becoming. But no one tells you that. They tell you to manifest, to optimize, to balance your life as if life is a spreadsheet, as if the soul can be managed like a budget. This is not self-improvement. This is self-delusion. Real growth, the kind that transforms you, is violent. It is raw. It shakes the foundation of who you are. It does not come in the form of comfort. It comes when your world falls apart and you are forced to ask, who am I now that everything familiar is gone? But most people never ask that question because they never let go of the familiar. They would rather be comfortable in their suffering than risk the unknown of becoming. And so they stay in dead relationships. They stay in soul-crushing jobs. They stay surrounded by noise because silence would confront them with their own emptiness. They say, I'm fine. But fine is not alive. Fine is a flat line. Understand this. There is no growth without tension, no transformation without discomfort, no becoming without sacrifice. If you want to give birth to yourself, you must first kill the illusion that comfort is your friend. It is not. It is a cage with soft pillows. Yes, it may feel safe, but safety is not aliveness. It is a lullaby sung by a dying culture that wants you docile, obedient, and numb. I do not want you to be numb. I want you to feel again, to hurt, to wonder, to rebel, to rise, because in that fire the true self is born, and until that happens you are only existing. So ask yourself now, are you truly living, or are you just comfortable? Because the cost of comfort is everything you were meant to become. Number 2, you're afraid to be alone with yourself. Let me ask you something that most people avoid their entire lives. When was the last time you sat in complete silence without a screen, a person, or a distraction and truly faced yourself? For many, the answer is never. You say you're busy, you say you're productive, but I say you are afraid. Afraid to be alone, afraid of the thoughts that come in silence, afraid of the truth you might hear if you stopped moving for just a moment. And that fear is what keeps you empty. Modern man is surrounded by noise. He wakes to notifications. He falls asleep to static. He fills his hours with podcasts, memes, playlists, posts. Not because he's curious, but because he's terrified of being alone with his own mind. Because in that silence, something terrifying happens. You start to hear your real voice, and that voice might say, I'm not happy. I don't like who I've become. I've betrayed myself just to be accepted. So you run, you open your phone, you call someone, you play music, you drown that voice out before it gets louder. But the voice doesn't go away. It waits, and it will wait forever until you are brave enough to sit with it and listen. This is why so many people hop from relationship to relationship. They say they're in love, but they're really afraid of being alone. They don't want a partner, they want a distraction, or they obsess over work, filling every minute with tasks, meetings, ambitions, not because it brings meaning, but because it keeps them from confronting the void inside. Or they can't spend 5 minutes without a screen. The silence becomes unbearable, because silence is the only place where the mask falls off. But here is the great paradox. You cannot become yourself if you're never willing to be alone with yourself. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the soil in which self-awareness grows. It is in solitude that you stop pretending. You stop performing. You finally meet yourself, not the role, not the brand, not the persona, but the one beneath it all. And yes, it will be uncomfortable at first. You will feel restless. You will want to escape. You may even feel lost, but stay. Stay in the silence long enough, and you will begin to remember who you are without them, without the crowd, without the algorithm, without the mask. Because here is the truth they never taught you. You are not whole in spite of your solitude. You are whole because of it. If you never learn to be alone, you will always depend on others to tell you who you are. And if they leave, you will crumble, because you've built your identity on their presence. But when you build yourself in silence, no one can take that away from you. So the next time you feel that urge to text, to scroll, to distract, pause. Ask yourself, what am I trying to run from right now? Because until you stop running, you will never arrive. And the place you need to arrive at is the quiet truth of your own being. Number 3, the illusion of success is destroying you. Modern man is not free. He is enslaved by his own illusions. And the most seductive illusion of all is success. You were told, work hard, get the title, buy the car, own the house, build the brand, post the proof. They called it progress. But I call it spiritual death. Because what they never told you is that success, as defined by this society, is a trap. Not because it requires effort, but because it demands that you betray yourself for applause. Look at the so-called winners of modern life. The influencer who can't sleep without checking views, the CEO who earns millions but drinks alone in silence, the student who gets perfect grades but has no idea who they are. These people are not thriving. They are performing. They are acting out a script written by others, chasing approval from a world that does not care about their soul. And the tragedy is, they don't even know it, because the illusion of Success is not just external. It infects your mind. It makes you believe that your worth is measured by your productivity, that your identity is defined by your resume, that your happiness must be postponed until you earn it, until you get the job, until you get the money, until you get the person, until you get the validation. But what happens when you get it all and still feel empty? You panic, you scroll for answers, you buy more things, you chase new goals, and still the silence inside you grows louder. That silence is your real self crying out, "This is not who I am," but you don't listen because you are afraid. Afraid to lose status, afraid to disappoint others, afraid to admit that what you built is a prison made of gold. I tell you now, success without self is failure. You can have the world's admiration and still feel dead inside. You can have every box checked and still feel like a stranger to yourself. Why? Because success, true success, is not about what you accumulate, it's about what you become. And becoming is not glamorous. It is slow, it is messy, it does not come with applause, it comes with self-awareness. It comes with integrity. It comes with saying no to what looks good and yes to what feels right, even if it makes you invisible for a while. Most people will never choose this path because real success is low. At first, it means walking away from what everyone else is chasing. It means disappointing the crowd to honor your soul. It means asking yourself, am I building a life that looks good or one that feels true? The world will tell you to chase more. I am telling you to stop and ask what is enough. Because if you don't define success for yourself, the world will define it for you. And their version will slowly destroy you. So I ask you, do you want to be impressive or do you want to be whole? Number 4, you're addicted to approval. It's a key and it's killing you. There was a time when people asked, is this right? Now they ask, what, will they like me for it? You think you're making choices. You think you're free. But in truth, most of what you do is for the eyes of others. You post for them. You speak for them. You dress for them. You live for them. And all the while, the real you, the unfiltered, unapproved, uncomfortable truth of you remains hidden. Why? Because you are addicted. Not to drugs, not to alcohol, but to approval. It starts young. You were praised when you followed the rules, smiled when you were sad, performed when you were tired. You learned that love was conditional, that acceptance came with a price. And the price was authenticity. So you began to trade pieces of yourself for validation, for a gold star, for a like, for a nod, for a good job. And now, as an adult, you continue the transaction. You become who they want you to be. At work, at home, online, you shapeshift so effortlessly, you've forgotten your original form. You've become a mirror reflecting what others want to see. But a mirror cannot feel. A mirror cannot live. It only performs. And that performance is killing you. Because to live a life of constant approval is to never truly exist. You become a ghost, smiling, nodding, agreeing while your true self withers in silence. Look at modern society. People won't speak unless it's trending. They won't act unless it's approved. They won't even feel unless someone else has felt it first. And the cost? You lose your intuition, you lose your courage, you lose yourself. People think addiction only destroys bodies. But approval addiction destroys the soul. You stop asking, what do I believe? And instead you ask, what do they expect from me? You stop expressing. You start performing. And the longer you perform, the more lost you become. Until one day you wake up and realize you've lived 20, 30, 40 years and you've never made a single decision just for you. That is the quiet tragedy of our age. But I tell you now, there is another way. You can begin to walk back home to yourself. You can begin to say no when you mean no. To speak even if your voice shakes. To disappoint others in order to protect your truth. Yes, people may walk away. But those who remain will finally see you. Because approval is not love. It is control. And the moment you stop seeking it, is the moment you start becoming. Be warned, the world will not applaud your authenticity. but your soul will. And that, my friend, is the only applause that truly matters. Number 5. Becoming yourself means losing the old you. Everyone says they want to change until they realize what change actually costs. Let me tell you a truth most people spend their whole lives avoiding. To become who you truly are, you must let the old you die. Not improve, not tweak, not optimize, die. Because self-improvement in the deepest sense is not about becoming better. It is about becoming real. And realness cannot exist while you're still clinging to the person you were taught to be. But here is the problem. Most people don't want truth, they want comfort. They want the illusion of transformation without the pain of release. They read books, they listen to podcasts, they go to therapy, and yet still they refuse to let go of who they've always been. They say, this is just who I am. This is how I was raised. This is what works for me. But what they're really saying is, I'm too afraid to outgrow my past. I've seen it in the corporate man who built a 6-figure career but lost his soul chasing numbers. He wants peace, but he's addicted to stress. He wants purpose, but he's terrified to start over. I've seen it in the woman who plays caretaker for everyone while secretly begging for someone to see her pain. She wants to be free, but she doesn't know who she is if she's not needed. And I've seen it in the young person who builds an online identity, gets the likes, the applause, but cannot sleep at night because they know it's all a performance. They want truth. But they're afraid that the truth won't be liked, so they stay stuck, not because they can't change, but because they don't want to die. Because that's what real change demands. The death of the people pleaser, the death of the mask, the death of the version of you who was shaped by fear, by shame, by expectation. And that kind of death is terrifying. You will lose friends. You will disappoint family. You will no longer fit the mold that made others comfortable. But I tell you now, that is the price of freedom. You cannot be reborn while still clinging to the womb. If you want to become yourself, you must shed the false self, piece by piece. The version of you that said yes when you wanted to scream no. The version of you that chased money while starving for meaning. The version of you that performed love but never truly felt it. These versions must be buried, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because only in that burial does the real self rise. Not a perfect self, not a self that will be universally liked, but a grounded, conscious, and alive being, one who can look in the mirror and finally say, this is me, unapologetically, unconditionally, unfinished but true. The modern world doesn't want this version of you. It wants the obedient you, the agreeable you, the aesthetic you. But I do not care for those versions. I care for the version of you that is still buried beneath performance, the one that speaks in silence, the one that aches to come alive. So, ask yourself now, what version of me must die so that I can finally live? Because until you face that death, you are not improving. You are only preserving the mask. And no mask, no matter how beautiful, will ever give you peace. Now that you've heard these truths, the question is no longer, should I change? The real question is, will I dare to face myself as I am? Without distraction, without performance, without excuses. Because that is where self-improvement begins. Not in a book, not in a course, not in someone else's steps. It begins in the silence, where you ask yourself with trembling honesty, what parts of me were built to be accepted and what parts were buried to be real? Start there. Begin by creating small moments of truth. Turn off the noise. Be alone with your thoughts. Feel the discomfort. That discomfort is your compass. It points toward what must be healed, what must be changed, what must be reclaimed. Don't aim to impress. Aim to connect first with yourself, then with the world around you. Self-improvement is not a destination. It is a revolution of the soul, repeated daily. You will fall. You will regress. But every time you return to yourself, you become stronger. And do not wait until you feel ready. You will never feel ready to become someone you've never been. Begin anyway. Peel off the layers. Let the old self go and have the courage to be seen, even if it means standing alone. Because in a world addicted to illusion, becoming yourself is the most radical act of all.